Um, Thank you again, Donna, and greetings, everyone. Thanks for joining us in the second and final webinar of the 2017 Rose Architectural Fellowship Recruiting Cycle. My name is Christopher Scott, and I am the Program Director for the Rose Fellowship. We are in the exciting final days of the recruiting cycle, and we want to arm you with all the information you need to put forward a compelling and informed application. So for those of you that joined us for the first webinar, you had the opportunity to hear from the incoming host organizations about the culture of their organizations and their vision for the fellowship. This particular webinar will be a little bit different in that the focus of today's conversation will be to hear from our current fellows. We will also aim to provide a large block of time on the back of the presentations for questions and answers. So to kick off, let me just first express that the Rhodes Fellowship is much different than a traditional design role. The working environment, work responsibility, and even the level of resources you have available to execute those responsibilities are all different than a typical architectural role. The versatility it takes of an architect to navigate those differences is what makes the fellowship fun, but it's also what makes the fellowship a little bit hard at times. And in fact, some of our fellows have described the fellowship as the hardest but most rewarding job of their life. I tend to like this characterization because the fellowship, it provides this perspective that's very candid, which is that the fellowship is hard, and you should come into this fellowship expecting to have to navigate challenges. Still, as you can see from this slide, you will be surrounded by a fellowship family that will be your support for the 3-year journey of growth as you and your host organization both advance design excellence within the community development field. So we have what promises to be a rich discussion ahead, so I'm going to keep my comments short so that we can spend as much time hearing from the fellows and taking audience questions. Before we get to the fellows, I wanted to first remind you of important dates on the horizon and also several updates to the schedule. With regard to updates to the schedule, I want to call out that we added 2 in-person recruiting events to the schedule. Both recruiting events will take place next Thursday, June 22nd. One of the events will be in Atlanta, and that is going to be a mixer sponsored by the local chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects. I will be in attendance at that particular event. The other event will be in Philadelphia and is going to be a brown bag session sponsored by the Community Design Collaborative. We posted the details of both events to social media, so please check social media for details, and we absolutely look forward to seeing you in person. And finally, just to reiterate, the most important date is July 9th. That is the application deadline. I don't anticipate any further schedule updates, but please do stay close to us through all modes of social media and email over the coming weeks for any updates. Now for the agenda. I provided an overview of the fellowship on the previous webinar, which is available by recording online, so I'm not going to repeat that introduction. However, if you have specific questions about the fellowship structure, I'm happy to answer those questions in the Q&A portion of this webinar. Shortly, we're going to hear from 3 current fellows that are going to provide short presentations. I've asked the fellows to give you a background on the organizations they work for and to speak to their work responsibilities within those organizations. I expect this will be a good opportunity for you to hear what you can expect both professionally and personally within the fellowship experience. And as a reminder, as we're going through the presentations and questions arise for you, feel free to submit them in the question box so that we can get your questions queued up for the end of the webinar. It will be incredibly helpful once we get to the moderated portion of the Q&A if you specify within your written question which individual your question is directed toward. So the first presentation will be from Leah Oxenhandler, who is in the first year of her fellowship in Philadelphia. After that, you will hear from Stephen Klinick, who is a 3rd-year fellow based in Minneapolis, and he's also been partnering with the Trust for Public Land on the design of their fellowship structure. So he can be helpful with shedding light on that particular fellowship opportunity once we get to the Q&A. Lastly, you'll hear from James Aronson, who is also 3rd year in Minnesota, but his work is rural focused. I asked James to be on this call to provide that rural perspective. So we have a nice mix of freshmen and upperclassmen, urban and rural, and at least 2 fellows that have close touch with some of the incoming host organizations. So I hope this will be an illuminating discussion. With that, I'd like to pass it off to our first presentation from Leah Oxenhandler.
Hi, everyone. This is Leah Oxenhandler, and as Christopher said, I am a first-year fellow in Philadelphia. In my background, which I'll get into a little bit while the presentation transfers over to my control, is working pretty much in a very traditional architecture firm setting, where I worked at a firm in Philadelphia for 6 years after I finished my Master of Architecture, and I was working on projects that were, you know, like $100 million buildings, and they were in Virginia and Texas and Seattle, Washington, and London, and I think I was originally really drawn to the fellowship because it gave me the opportunity to focus a lot more locally on my environment that I lived in and my city that I had grown to really love over the last, I don't know, I have been here almost 10 years now, and it has really proven to be a nice change from what I was doing in a firm environment. Hang on one second, I'm still trying to get control here. So now that I am a first-year fellow, I am about 6 months into my position at People's Emergency Center, which is a community development corporation, but also a larger nonprofit that does a lot of work in the West Philadelphia area of Philly. And my title at PEC is Architect and Design Manager. And our mission, and this is part of Christopher's point about how this is really not a traditional design job, PEC in general is a wraparound service providing nonprofit that tries to create a better neighborhood for people to live and work through not just real estate development, that is part of what I'm involved in, but we do a lot of economic development, and we are a homeless shelter for women and children. Homeless women and children is the main population that we serve, but we also provide affordable housing throughout our neighborhood in the form of scattered site rentals, some more focused properties. We also try to do commercial development along our commercial corridor to provide retail and service jobs. And then we also have a million different programs that I'm still learning about, but everything from digital inclusion, which teaches people in the neighborhood and free programming to learn about different ways that they can use technology to be successful, low-cost internet, job training, a food cupboard, a million different things. So we try to create a community of choice in West Philadelphia. And part of that mission is also to nurture families, strengthen neighborhoods, and drive change. So these are sort of an overview of our services. And right now I just came from an event where I have 8 of these volunteers. They're called community connectors, and they're neighborhood teenagers who are in high school or recently finished high school, who help around the neighborhood to get a lot of the resources that we provide out to the community. So I'm working with them on a project that I'm going to go through later in my presentation, so you can get a sense of what I'm currently working on. So as I mentioned, we're focused in West Philadelphia, and we focus on these 5 primary neighborhoods: Belmont, Mantua, Saunders Park, West Powelton, and Mill Creek. And the project I was just talking about is right over here at one of the corners of our service area. And Lancaster Avenue is this very prominent commercial corridor that cuts right through all of our neighborhoods. And that's where we focus a lot of our development efforts. And we are guided, our work is guided here at the CDC by a plan called a Make Your Mark Lower Lancaster Revitalization Plan, which was developed through about a year-and-a-half worth of public meetings and workshops with the community back in 2012, where they came up with a neighborhood master plan that guides a lot of the projects that we do now. And you can see this is sort of a sketch that came out of the planning process of opportunities in the neighborhood, and there was an identification that the neighborhood wanted to be sort of an arts destination. So a lot of our planning and our tenant finding and our development now is based on creating a more diverse neighborhood that fulfills real needs and diversity of food, and trying to make food more available in this neighborhood, but also trying to create something of an arts destination. You can see here art gallery, yoga, exercise, dance, and this is the site I was just talking about again, so it is a big anchor site in the neighborhood. So again, our impact tries to be Lancaster Avenue, neighborhoods, and everything in between. So a lot of the work that we do focuses on vacant lots or other infill sites around the community. And these are some of our built projects that we have recently completed. So a lot of what we do is facade revitalization along the corridor. This is one of our shelters, which also rehabbed the historic building. This is one of our new retail places, Fresh Donuts, in the neighborhood, to bring some food diversity to the commercial corridor. This is a really nice project of permanent affordable rentals called the Bigham Leatherberry Place, designed by Digsaw, which is an architecture firm local to Philadelphia. And this one was just recently completed. It's affordable artist housing. So in order to get into this Section 8 voucher housing community, you have to be an artist and go through an intensive application process. And there are loft apartments that really have beautiful light and spaces to encourage people to like live, work in their spaces. And this is just an overview of some of our programs. We have free exercise classes. We do a lot of murals in the neighborhood and encourage these things. We have these computer classes, and this lab is right across from my office, so I see people coming in and out all the time to use our public computer lab. We also host a big Lancaster Avenue Jazz Fest every year, where we have local jazz performers come to one of the parks in our neighborhood, and we get about 3,000 people every year come to this event, and it's coming up in a couple of weeks. So a bunch of my colleagues are hard at work planning that. And we also have First Fridays, where we open up all the local art galleries in the neighborhood. But I want today to talk to you guys a little bit about one of my projects that I'm really focused on at the moment. And as I mentioned previously, this is one of our really big anchor sites in the neighborhood called the United Bank. It's now the former United Bank that PEC acquired about 7 years ago as a really strategic site, because there's a lot of development pressures in our neighborhood from Drexel University, that owns the large site across the street, and University of Pennsylvania, which is also directly adjacent. There's a hospital that Penn owns. It's directly adjacent over on this corner. And then across the street is owned by Drexel. So our neighborhood is really interesting because there's a lot of forces at work. There's influence from student housing developers. A lot of students are moving into the neighborhood. A lot already live here. And then there's big push for more affordable housing. And then there's another push for really diverse mixed income communities. So we bought this site as a site that is strategic and wants to be reserved for community use. So my project right now that has evolved over another planning process concurrent with our other Make Your Mark plan that grew out of the Make Your Mark plan. And this is sort of the timeline of that plan. You can see we're just past the final plan. So we have completed, and I was lucky to be here for most of this, starting around January, a series of focus groups and public meetings. And out of that, we've developed a strategy for how to reuse the bank building, the former United Bank building. And part of that is to reclaim the space for community arts programming, but also to use the site as a public space for the community. So this is some of the arts programming that we've done so far. You can see we've been using pop-up furniture displays. We've done parking day, and all in the goal of engaging the community around conversation about the transitional nature of this site, how there's a lot of change in the neighborhood, and how can we use arts to engage our neighbors to have a conversation about change and how this building relates to that. So this is just an example of one of the community meetings. We've been using a planning firm to kind of facilitate them and run the meetings. So you can see all of these graphics and things they've used as marketing tools to get people to come to the meetings. This was a particularly well-attended meeting where a lot of people were participating, and there was a really good turnout. And then as another part of my project, I'm going to show a series of before, during, and after photos. Part of my response and PEC's response to this prompt to, make the bank space more amenable to community use, where, we've owned it for quite some time now, and you can see that the space is pretty drab and not really well organized. There's sort of like tables in the corner and like chairs, and it wasn't really being used for to its fullest potential. So I was co-teaching a class with Drexel University freshmen, architecture and interior design freshmen this past semester, and we did a project-based version of a class called Intro to Civic Engagement, Civic 101. And we worked with 50 students to renovate the interior of the building. And it was sort of a light touch renovation, but you can see it was a bit chaotic at times. I've done my best to match up these photos, but this is sort of the end result. So we've taken a bunch of Saturdays and Sundays and just worked really hard with all of these students to paint murals and reorganize the furniture and take some of these spaces that, like you see on the left is the previous bank teller counter. We organized the right corner to be like a little lounge with some artwork, just be more usable for the community events and classes and arts programs that are held in the space. It's really a multi-use space, so we wanted to leave it really flexible and easy for people to rearrange when they come in and use it and leave. And then these are photos of the building from the exterior. So now what I just came from today with all of my volunteers out on the site here is this project, which is the public space proof of concept. We're calling it the Park at the Bank. And our vision is to do something like this eventually, where we put up string lights and redo the signage and basically show that something is going on at this site. Even though we don't have a long-term tenant for this building yet, we don't have a long-term reuse, funding in place to do construction, that something is going on and that somebody has claimed this site because it has sat for almost a decade now, totally vacant, and the neighbors just kind of ignore it at this point. So this is our vision for this side of the site. And now you can see we've started to build this out as part of a collaborative action grant that Enterprise gives out to various community organizations around the country every year, and this has supported this work in our project to start doing the sidewalk mural and show just that the community has started to reclaim the site around this building. And we see it, again, as a proof of concept for more permanent public space. And we started this week to paint the inside of the parking lot, which you can see in the bottom right here. And tomorrow we're going to be installing picnic tables and chairs on the site and umbrellas, and we're going to have an opening party. So I guess just in summary, I think it's really, it's been a really engaging experience for me so far, much more tangible than what I was doing before. And I really enjoy just being kind of on the ground doing this kind of work that makes a visible impact in the neighborhood. It's been really nice for me to just have the opportunity to like talk to people and be out of my office and meeting my neighbors. And I know that more serious development projects are on the horizon, but in the meantime, it's been really nice to just get out and do something tangible in the community. So it's just, I wanted to just give everyone a little bit of a summary of what I've done so far in my fellowship, and I look forward to hearing everyone's questions. Now I'm going to hand it over to Stephen, who is next as next presenter.
Thank you, Leah. I have to come to town for your Parkway grand opening. I'm excited to see it. So again, I'm Stephen Klimak. I'm in my 3rd year of the fellowship, and I'm based in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I'm hosted by the Cornerstone Group, which I'll talk a little bit about. And this is just kind of a generic background that I have of projects I've done in the past. My background's in architecture. I went to Syracuse University, undergrad and graduate, and did a lot of neighborhood and community development and organizing events and projects there. And I moved to New York City, where I worked for a few different design-oriented nonprofits doing small-scale tactical design build projects in public spaces, working with artists and designers to transform neglected public spaces in the city into future publicly owned park spaces, as well as working on design competitions, kind of reimagining complex social, cultural, and environmental challenges. And since moving to Minneapolis, I have kind of 2 big projects that I've been shepherding and working on for the last 2.5 years, as well as some of my own kind of small-scale design projects. But I wanted to start with why. This is something that our team at the Cornerstone Group's been really digging into and looking at and considering of who are we and why are we doing what we do. And I think that this is something that speaks to a lot of people who are interested in the Rose Fellowship and become Rose Fellows, that we really are driven by a purpose to see design make positive changes in the world. You know, it's easy to be an architect and work at a firm and do drawings, or to do a development project and just build something, but having real clear intentions of why we do it and making sure that our values show up in the work is something that we are really strategic and specific about. So our mission and what we do is we create and cultivate thriving places that contribute to the well-being of people and our planet. This is really what drives us. We are a very small team on our development team. There's 3 of us at the moment, and we have a property management team that's about 35 people. But we really all worked on this together, and we came up with what drives us and what we're all about is about people. But we're in the business of place, more or less. We are a for-profit and mission-driven real estate developer. So we do 3 different types of work. We build real estate and projects, multi-tenant housing, mixed-use projects. We do property management. We own 9 affordable housing properties across the Twin Cities, and we have about 1,000 units of affordable housing, which we're always trying to improve and make better. And another part of what we do in both of those scenarios is creative community engagement, whether it's in a new community that we're going into where we might be doing a project, or if it's on one of our sites where we own housing and have residents. We bring in artists, we bring in designers, and we try to facilitate community building through arts, through design, get people to create community and be more connected to the place that they are in. And we find that that's really helped our work advance with the values that we have of people, place, and planet. And so I have this little slide that I think this is a personal thing. This is me as a professional, and I think it's also part of what our team does and what a Rose Fellow does is you take apples and oranges and you try to make something much better and completely different out of it. If we can make that the core definition of collaboration, but really this 1 + 1 = 3. Most people don't do creative community engagement work in their real estate developments. Most real estate developments aren't always value driven. And so what I'm going to talk about 2 specific projects then that I've been spending the last 2.5 years on. One is a new development project that we had initially. We grew out of planning work that neighborhoods between Minneapolis and St. Paul did with a light rail line that was built 2 years ago and opened up that connected downtown Minneapolis to downtown St. Paul. And it became a site to envision what a new neighborhood could look like. It was old industrial land, railroad land, underused industrial manufacturing spaces that once the light rail came through and it was right next to the University of Minnesota and a pretty active neighborhood, was envisioned as a new district, a new kind of neighborhood where the opportunity of the land was to a blank slate that we could envision what a 21st century neighborhood could and should be. And so there's lots of development pressure happening, like in Leah's context in Philly. The University of Minnesota is right next to this site and is expanding. There's a lot of prime land that is being bought by other developers to build lots of projects on. And the neighborhood's vision was to create this kind of rich mix of uses, that this would be a place that would have 21st century economy jobs, not just industrial or manufacturing jobs or retail jobs, but would attract diverse employment, that it would pull from kind of being really close to not only the University of Minnesota, but several other universities in the area to be an innovation district, that this is a place where ideas could incubate and people could create jobs and really build a new life for themselves. And that they'd also have a diversity of housing options, a diversity of activities to do. And so in lots of long process before I came on board at the Cornerstone Group, an area of about 370 acres, which you can see a little bit outlined here, was identified by a group of 30 plus stakeholders to be this innovation district. And so it's right between Minneapolis and St. Paul. It actually spans both cities, and it spans both counties that we're in. And so this is a little bit about seeing some of the projects and activities we have going on there. It's really well situated, which makes it a huge opportunity, but also a lot of pressure on us. And this is the network of stakeholders and organizations that we work with and that I work with pretty directly. So my team was a landowner in the area for a while. We no longer are. But my work has pretty much been the same throughout this entire process. It was to help facilitate a district approach to development. So where everyone has their own projects and properties, and what we've been trying to do is coordinate and collaborate the development. So looking beyond just our own property lines and see where we can work together to make each other's projects better. So we have neighborhood organizations involved, land use communities and maintenance groups, but also groups like energy companies and health insurance companies, tech companies, and other real estate developers that all see this rich mix of diverse values in a 21st century neighborhood as being something really compelling and interesting. And so there's lots of projects going on at the moment, and I'm kind of one of the glue and the thread that stitches them all together. So we have a lot of housing projects and a lot of mixed use projects, and some of them are market rate housing and some of them are affordable housing. And we're trying to support all of those and make each of them better by building shared systems, shared infrastructure. This is all old industrial land where there really hasn't been anything before. So this is a district stormwater system we built with a watershed group and multiple partners. It cost a couple $1 million, and it manages and treats and stores stormwater from 6 different private parcels in an area, which has made each person's project less expensive and more increases opportunity to create more housing units on it. We're trying to create a shared district energy system so that not everyone has to have the same redundant and inefficient systems within their own buildings, but we could each put in funds and work together to share a shared thermal loop system that would heat and cool our buildings together and be a more resilient long-term infrastructure. And we're also looking at kind of the public realm. We're rebuilding streets, and this is a project that I've been working on with the Trust for Public Land here in Minneapolis to create a signature green space right in the middle of this district. We wanted to make sure that as development was happening and as there was a lot of pressure, that we ensured there was green space that was accessible to everyone, and that the planning and design of it was done by people who live in the community and represent a really diverse set of perspectives. So if you can imagine, with that large list of partners, we have a lot of planning work to do, and it's really never-ending planning and trying to make sure that as new projects come in, as new players come to the table, we're always respecting their values and their perspectives and trying to incorporate them into the work. And so we do a lot of creative community engagement, as we call it, bringing in artists, working with people in the neighborhood, creating projects that get people involved and have them be part of and engage in the spaces that are being transformed, and give their perspective and their input and give them agency in making that future happen. And the biggest project I've been working on is we're reconstructing a street in this area to be one of the greenest streets in the region, trying to create really active and vibrant social spaces, active living spaces, really collecting and managing stormwater and reducing parking. So this is a really big project I've been part of to be a signature demonstration of what all these shared district values are about. And so I'm actually a consultant on this project from our team for this partnership. I'm their staff knitting it all together at the moment, and trying to push the organization that's behind all of this work into a place that can be long-term and sustainable. And another project that I've been involved in pretty heavily the last 2.5 years is Lindale Gardens, which is a real estate development project that the Cornerstone Group's been doing invited by the city of Richfield, which is just south of Minneapolis, to be a healthy and arts-driven town center for the city. And we've gone through, over the last 2.5 years and the 6 years the project's been going on, about a dozen iterations of what the development, the actual project that would get built, will become. And so it's been lots of pro forma and financing and figuring out how we make it work. But at the same time, we've been doing a lot of arts engagement with people in the neighborhood, and we just finished building this new public space. The site's on the shore of a lake that no one really knows is there, and so we opened it up. We built an amphitheater. We worked with artists to create a community-made mosaic on the site, which you can kind of see behind the crew over here, and we're just having our grand opening in 2 weeks on this site. So we're very excited about this. And it's been a really interesting opportunity to bring people into the site and engage them in what it could be for the city, while we're coming up with a final real estate development plan that we think will be feasible on our end, but also making sure that it's reflecting the values of our company, but the values and the priorities of the community around us. So I, as a Rose Fellow, kind of feel like I'm in this weird in-between, translating between lots of different partners, lots of different groups that speak different languages and have different priorities, and trying to facilitate and support a shared 1 + 1 = 3 outcome. And I think the fellowship can be described in many ways, but it's definitely a trek, it's an experience, it's a hike, it's a very complex yoga Pilates routine, and we're constantly building the plane while we fly it, all of which are very complicated, but I think there's a kind of an entrepreneurship and a gumption to the fellowship experience that makes it a really fun and rewarding experience. So that is my quick pitch. I will hand it over to James to talk about his work, and then Cato.
James, it looks like you're on mute. James, if you're talking, it looks like you're on mute.
And that is absolutely correct, Christopher. Thank you for that. My last point was, Stephen, thank you. And the graphics you showed at the end of your presentation were kind of sweet, actually. The space between is where we all seem to exist sometimes as fellows. And we certainly know we certainly understand what it means to be a candidate at this point in time. So thank you all for joining us here. I think I do have control now. Make sure that this is working for me. There we go. Just a little bit slow on my internet connection. There. All right. Well, I am James Aronson. I'm a third-year Rose Fellow like Stephen. I'm working in a different location in Minnesota also, but rural, not urban. I work for the Southwest Minnesota Housing Partnership. We're about a 20-person community development corporation that serves a 27-county rural region in the southwestern part of the state. We really serve more like 30 counties, and we've been working northwestern Iowa. It's kind of anything that's rural, if it's reachable, we'll do. That's been the history of our work over the last 25 years. And we continue to be really the largest organization engaging this topic where we live. So I stepped out of the city, Minneapolis actually, to come out to rural Minnesota and do this work. Quick plug, I'm just going to give you guys an overview of the last year, some just snapshots of what's been going on so you can see the last, primarily the second year work. New website and logo, this is organizational. I think our previous logo was trapped in the late 90s, so it's good to be fresh now with a new logo and a website that really showcases more of the work we've been doing for so long. It's just a nice face to the public that we've recently completed. That was a big project. This spreadsheet here, don't look at the details. That's not important. What is important is the pipeline, and this is just a window into my world where I am as a fellow right now. The pipeline for all of our organizations, if you speak about a pipeline, it's all the projects that are in some form of development at some stage in the process, from early concept to actual construction. And right now, our pipeline is pretty full. It's over 800 total units, more than half of which are full rental assistance. And we talk sometimes about tax credit funding because that is a mechanism that we all deal with in affordable housing, at least most of us. And we submitted 6 applications, 4 of them were approved. That encompasses 12 individual projects and 345 total units. We own and have developed over the last 25 years almost 1,700 units. And right now the pipeline is about half of what we've developed in 25 years right now. So in other words, we're pretty busy. And I think this is really a reflection of the demand, the high demand for affordable housing in our region. Certainly that has not diminished over time, and we're just as busy now as ever. And perhaps the reality that we have a hard time saying no to people who really ask for our assistance. So we continue to move in all of those ways. Come on, slide. There we go. A little bit slow. So we do multifamily and single-family work. This is a snapshot of the single-family work, which we dove back into in earnest last year. During the recession a few years ago, none of this was being done, but we started with 10 new homes last year. 5 of them have been sold. We're currently bidding 10 more homes. The images on the left are those homes recently built near completion at the time. And what we found is something that I think has always been true. Affordable single-family development is actually very difficult. It sounds simple to build a house on a small parcel of land, but construction costs have only gone up, and with them also have land and site development costs and infrastructure expenses. All of these things are weighing heavier than ever before on the price point for the homes we're trying to provide to people that can go there, that have the opportunity to own, invest in their own property. It's great for them to do that whenever they possibly can, as soon as possible for their future. We're just doing the best we can right now to, I think, craft this in a way that can move forward sustainably. And as part of that, developing new models like the house on the right, along with sustainability and some other features that are uncommon in our historical work, is part of the new push. And I played a role in those new design directions that we are currently exploring. In St. Peter, where 6 of those single-family homes were built, and more to come, there's also a 30-unit fully supportive housing project called Solace. And Solace is extremely unique for us. It's our first fully supportive project, and it's designed primarily to assist women and families that have a past connection to the Department of Corrections or incarceration. What we've seen and continue to see really across the country is a very common cycle of reincarceration. If you come through the system, many times those same people fall back into the old ways or old habits with old relationships, and this is an intentional project to help break that cycle of repeated trouble. And it comes with supportive housing services, so that the people who choose willingly to live here would become part of a community of other people who understand where they've come from, the journey that they've been on, Many of them have families, young children. They're trying to stitch their life back together with all of those factors, and the supportive services are there to help everyone deal with those transitional challenges they'll encounter. And it's a unique project in Minnesota, kind of groundbreaking, and from what I continue to hear, a unique project nationally. This is currently in design development stage. Next slide. There it is. So we're not just about housing. One of the projects that I recently completed was called a CERT Seed Grant to explore the potential of community solar development and how that within our region, working with smaller local and regional utilities, can hopefully assist the goals of affordable housing. So there's two goals within this process. We had a number of partners and talking specifically about how we develop projects just like this picture here, small-scale community solar developments. And what we've learned, or certainly I've learned along the way, the world of energy policy, energy trading, power purchase agreements between utilities and power providers is extremely complex, no less complex than the tax credit system that we worked with directly to accomplish affordable housing projects. And we certainly made headway and built relationships that I think will unfold slowly to open doors in this space. But right now it's still a journey that we're on, seeking some more compelling benefits from the solar energy to support the goals of affordable housing. These images here are of a very unique project called the Rock County History Center. And a quick background on this. It is in Luverne, Minnesota. Luverne, Minnesota is about 5,000 people, small town near Sioux Falls in the southwest corner. The local historical society had purchased this old automotive dealership and maintenance shop on the far eastern end of their downtown district, and their vision was to turn that into their future, or the future of their historical museum, which they have maintained in town for a number of years. They bought the building, but they were struggling, as we learned shortly after I became a fellow, struggling to find the ability to move this project forward and really, I think, realize their vision to renovate this property. So we had a conversation, and over the course of a few months kind of came to an understanding that we had similar goals and values, and that our resources of design with my assistance and a construction arm, which is a for-profit wing of the housing partnership that I'm employed by, could be helpful in moving their project forward. So we agreed to assist with their renovations and design through a design-build process, which is something we've never done before, something I've not done before. It was not on the work plan for the fellowship, per se. This was just one of those unique opportunities that happened to come along. So we dove headlong into it. And I ended up being a construction manager for about 4 months, which was quite a learning experience. But in doing this, we pulled a number of unique strings, including utilizing local volunteer labor, community service work crews that were available, a Department of Corrections construction trades labor crew to drive down the cost. We leveraged the owner's tax exempt status, and all of this kind of creative design and construction process allowed us to, at the transition point at the end of last summer, to drive the cost down about $128,000 under the nearly $1 million budget that they began with. And we leveraged tax-exempt savings on their own behalf of over $20,000, which to them was huge. They're just grateful for being able to accomplish what they've done. And at that point of transition in the project, there's another contractor who's finishing it up at a local level right now. Over the course of the winter, the owner set about setting up some exhibits inside, and they actually have a 1906 car that was produced right there in Luverne on display before the Ford Motor Company started to put a number of these small automakers out of business producing vehicles like you see on the left. And in truly unique fashion, they happen to have the, if I can get this slide to move, they have the Midwest's largest nutcracker exhibit now. I know this sounds a little kooky, But this is a very real, genuine thing. As part of a larger county museum that reflects the history of this community and this place, this is a tourism draw. And it's one of many things that the community of Laverne, who like many rural communities aren't expanding right now, but one of many things they've done to put them on the map, to make them a destination for people to come and see and spend a little time. So in a very unique way, exhibits like this, which are very unique in their own right, play a very real role in community economic development. And Laverne is actually a very forward-thinking place that way. They've done multiple projects like this that kind of set them apart from just small towns. And lastly, we were fortunate enough to receive a grant called the Art Place Community Development Investment Grant shortly after the beginning of my fellowship in 2015. And it's a unique grant in the sense that it's working to address the question of what does it mean, what does it look like to integrate arts and cultural strategies into the ongoing community development work of an organization like us that was not previously doing that. We were doing more traditional community development that has worked in our region. This is a new approach, and it's proving to be very valuable. And there's a variety of projects that are currently at work under the Partnership Art title, which is the initiative that we've created. And it's unique projects like this, opportunities that come along that we're able to seize upon, combined with resources like the Rose Fellowship and the expertise that that brings as a new way of thinking to the organization, that's really enhancing our ability to do community development now into the future, to do it better, to do it deeper, and to do it in more creative ways that have a greater impact than we've ever done before. So I have to say that, you know, being out here in the rural part of the state, engaging with the community that we engage in, it's certainly continuing to change and evolve and grow in new directions, and that's really exciting. And we're looking forward to being able to leverage these skills, resources, and the networks that we're building to greater benefit long term. That's it.
All right, at this point, I believe we are moving into Q&A. And I'm actually going to bring up another slide just to remind everyone how to ask questions. You can type them into the Q&A panel on that lower right-hand side of your screen. And we've already gotten a few questions already that have been, you'll see, have been already answered on our screen. And, excuse me, so I'm going to jump into some of the questions that have not yet been answered. And we have a question from Sean who'd like to know if community partnerships need to be defined at the time of the application.
I'd say that the host groups that you are all looking at their work plans for are identifying lots of community partners and collaborations. As a fellow, you'll be trying to nurture and curate those, but also are open to finding more as they can benefit the project or create better outcomes. So you don't need to set them necessarily in advance, but being able to demonstrate how you could create more connections to community or create partnerships, I think is a valuable skill to help demonstrate.
Yeah, absolutely. The willingness and ability to navigate those paths, which may not be fully clear or may change along the way during the fellowship, is just a position that's very helpful to take from the beginning as part of your application and on from there.
All right, terrific. The next question is also from Sean, and he would like to know, is it the applicant's responsibility to locate and define the host entity as part of the application?
That one's probably for me. So the way the setup works is that there's 5 host organizations that have already applied to be host organizations, and you would, as an applicant, apply to one of those 5 host organizations.
Thank you. Sarah would like to know, for all of the panelists, how has your work plan changed over the fellowship from what you initially envisioned?
That's a great question. Well, I'll just dive in quick. My work plan has changed quite a bit. It was actually very extensive and delineated when I began. There was a lot of specific items that I think people were imagining we'd have a checkbox for. And I've actually gone about and checkboxed most all of those items. But along the way, I think there's just been a growing realization that the fellowship itself is something of an unknown. You as a fellow are a very new and different resource than these organizations have had before, and that their own preconceptions about how and where you would be most effective is an ongoing learning process as well. So the best way for me to describe my experience is an evolution, not a fundamental change or course correction at all, just a continuous process of evolving and understanding where and how your skills as a resource connects best to the work.
And I'd add that I think there's an ability that you come to terms with of being comfortable with the discomfort that your work plan will change. I think most fellows' work plans evolve in some way, and your organizations evolve. I have had lots of staff leave my team, so I was thrown into new roles I wasn't expecting to be. They were complex and challenging, but also really rewarding because we just embraced that sense of the work plan and the opportunity the fellowship experience presents. And I think to answer another question, Lena's, that if I were to go back in time and look at my work plan or how I would do the fellowship differently, I would take more ownership over my work plan and what I wanted to have and do and get out of the fellowship earlier on. I think I spent maybe the first year just trying to figure it out, who was who the players were, and I think that's what we encourage everyone to do that. But I think if you feel comfortable or want to take more ownership over it, I think it's a great thing to try to do.
Yeah, I think I'll just jump in for a second. I think my work plan, when I first started, I guess coming from private architecture firm, I think you're really struck in the beginning of your fellowship by how dependent on funding all of your projects are. So a lot of the work plan, I think, is intended to be sort of a guide and be flexible. But, you know, part of the reason I've been doing this really hands-on project right now and been so involved in it at the bank is because my other projects are sort of in really early stages of funding applications and development. So my first couple of months in my fellowship were really spent doing my own grant applications to get this project off the ground, which was also part of my work plan. But I think my role wasn't supposed to be as hands-on and involved as it was. But I think it is like, as I think Stephen mentioned, it is sort of your role as a fellow is to be that glue that kind of brings a lot of pieces together. So being able to identify community partnerships and volunteer networks and spaces that need transforming or projects that are ongoing that you can actually increase your organization's involvement in. But that capacity building is sort of what the fellowship is about. And I think the work plan is meant to be a guide, but not necessarily be set in stone.
Terrific. Thank you, all three, for your response on that one. I'm going to try to slip one last question in. I know we haven't gotten to all of them, but to everyone who submitted a question that has not yet been answered, all these questions will be made available to our presenters after the session, so we will be getting back to you online afterward. And the very last question for the three of you, if you could quickly speak to the benefits of the Rose Fellowship Network.
James, maybe you can answer this one best, but I'll just say, just having been involved for the last 6 months or so, I was just really floored by how large the network is and how supportive enterprises and our individual success and our relationships to each other. They, you know, like part of the fellowship is about taking us on retreats so that we can spend time together, and a lot of them are really informative sessions and workshops and charrettes that we do together, but a lot of it is just about supporting each other in these sometimes difficult roles. And then Enterprise is a huge organization that has unlimited resources in terms of information and networks that they're involved in and markets that they work in. But I'd be interested to hear from James or Stephen, who have been around longer.
Leah, that was actually pretty good. I think you got a handle on some things there. I might add, as I think you were alluding to at the end there, the network that you develop naturally out of a very kind of deep, personal, often intimate type of connection in place with people is powerful. You also develop relationships with people at national levels that are engaged in the type of work that you are perhaps doing in your fellowship. They may be experts in that vein of the work. So you start to make those connections, which are really, at a national level. And the one thing for me is the mission. I was drawn to the fellowship for the mission aspect of it, like the reason, the purpose to work hard for something of real value, like affordable housing in communities, and assist them, for a brighter future building. This was a great way to step into that space in a place that I was intrigued by and actually just dig deep for 3 years and get something done that really has meaning and power for the people that you're building those relationships with. You're at a very personal position when you're a fellow. Typically, you are in close contact with the people that are really receiving the service that your organization is providing. I just don't know of any other program that allows you to do this the way the Rose Fellowship can.
You guys said it. I have nothing to add. It's perfect.
Okay, we are at time and actually a moment over. Christopher, do you have any wrap-up words for us?
Oh, yeah, sure. I know we're over time, so I'll just say thanks to everyone, both the fellows and the audience, for a packed hour. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any additional questions, and we'll be sure to get them answered if we didn't get them to them today. And, yeah, have a great afternoon, everyone.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you to all of our attendees today. We hope to see you online again soon. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone.
Good luck, everyone.